For the first time in Alfred history, I read a romantasy book that I thoroughly enjoyed. This is The Red Winter by Cameron Sullivan. Let's talk about it. And I have boba tea. Gnarly. Thank you to all the lovely people at Tor and Pan Macmillan for giving me a review copy of this one. I had a great time. It definitely helped that it was gay. I think half the battle was already won because our two main characters, they were shagging a lot. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Had a great time. This book comes out on the 26th of February. I would describe it as Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell had a slutty French gay brother, in that it's low fantasy, it's based on real historical events, it jumps around all over the place. Sometimes, most of the time, we're in the 18th century, but there's also addendums where we're in the 15th century and we're with Joan of Arc and the like 100-Year War. But then we're also in the 18th century leading up to the events of the French Revolution. So it's like latter half of the 18th century, and we're dealing with like the growing resentment of the working classes and the rich being very careless, a very familiar situation nowadays. Our main character, Professor Sebastian Grave, he was giving me like Doctor Who, or even I've not read yet The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, but it's what I imagine that would be like because he's this timeless being who has lived through thousands of years of human history, and he has all of these like mortal companions that he gets attached to despite the knowing realization that they can't be in each other's company forever. He also has an assistant called Livia, who is a succubus. She was not in the book enough. She could have her own book. Like there's something about having like a sex demon assistant that I was very into. Oh, and Professor Graves, he has like his own internalized demon called Sarmadel, who he's constantly like talking to in his head. Very into that. For me, it was the perfect mix of the supernatural and like a cheeky charm to it. It reminded me of classic shows. I'm thinking like Charmed, Lucifer, Grimm, like very bingeable. You wouldn't believe this was over 500 pages. I got through it like that. I have seen other people say that they found this book confusing in places. Sometimes it's difficult to set the scene because it takes place over so many different time periods, and we're in like different parts of France as well. So I think more could have been done to set apart the narratives. It doesn't help that our two main storylines are 20 years apart, and in one of them, Professor Graves, Sebastian, he's with the man that he falls in love with, and in another storyline, he's with his son. And so it gets a bit confusing because they very much there's parallel circumstances going on where they're trying to track down this beast, although that one of them actually is the beast, and they're trying to purge it from them. It can get a bit confusing. I do see that. As much as I prefer standalone fantasy, I would be very here for this book to be turned into a series. Cameron Sullivan, if you watch this, and you may well, I could do with a couple more books following Professor Sebastian Grave. I'm into him. He gives me like supernatural Poirot. He's smart. He has his wits about him, but he also has these very human urges to have lots of gay sex in the woods. Felt that on a personal level. Something that was also very Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell to me was the constant footnotes. This book loves a footnote, and again, it was those in universe references. There was a creative effort to make lore around demonology and religion and the history of this world, which, even though a lot of it is based in our own world, of course, because it's a historical France, there's that clever twist on it. It was almost giving me a YA book. No disrespect to young adult fiction, but just in its silly cheekiness. Like it really has a sense of humor that I enjoy. Of course, there are some very mature themes. I mean, there's a lot of people's hearts being ripped out and eaten. Although now that I think about it, there was what was that Derek Landy series where there were demons and they were eating each other? That was YA. What are those books called? Is it Demon Road? Is it the Demon Road books? I think it's Demon Road. Kind of give me some of that. Like, I would almost brand this as a YA book. For me personally, I didn't find it that confusing like others. My biggest gripe was that I didn't quite buy into their relationship. So, Sebastian and Antoine, they fall in love, I suppose, but not really because he goes off and like marries a woman because he's like a French nobleman, so he has to have children, etc. And Sebastian lets him because he knows that Sebastian himself is like an immortal who can't settle down with someone who's not going to live forever, but I wasn't really getting a sense of a connection between them. And what I was really worried was going to happen is when he starts spending time with Jacques, who is Antoine's son, 20 years later. I was really worried he was going to catch feelings for the son, and then he would have had both. It would have been a bit like that episode of Friends where like Monica has Richard and Richard's son, and it's a bit like, ugh. But no, this for the most part definitely works for me. I would recommend it. I will say that I don't read as much fantasy as a lot of other people on here do, so maybe I'm not the most discerning critic when it comes to this genre, especially romantasy. I will say at one point they literally do the one bed trope. And I was that DiCaprio meme. I was like, oh, that's like the thing that all the kids on the book talks tell me about, like the one bed trope. And it was happening in real time. I was like, oh, they have to share a bed. Oh, they're going to be intimate. That's like, I was like, oh, okay, I see why this plot device is so popular. And ultimately, who doesn't love werewolves? Particularly gay werewolves. There's something that feels very gay about a werewolf. I think it's like the body hair. Maybe like Dracula just changed me, like when Landon Cider did that like iconic werewolf look. But this book for me was very much like reclaiming werewolves as like for the gays. And I see that. I was like, yes, I am here for this.